Hello, my name is Connie Liu. I'm an undergraduate at MIT, and today we're going to be talking about sponges. So sponges are a really cool phyla of animals, or species of animals. They're composed of the phyla Calcera and Silicea. So these are the two phylum that contain all the sponges that are in the world. And there are actually 5,500 different species of sponges. Before, they were all categorized into one single phylum called Porifera, but now they're separated into two categories because there's enough differences between them in order for that to occur. So sponges are actually suspension feeders, and what that means is that water will flow through, and that water flowing through will allow them to capture food as it flows. So sponges capture food in a very specific way. They have pores on the side that are labeled here. These are the pores, and water can move through those pores into what is known as a spongicell, which is basically this open area within the sponge. And within that spongicell, there are these very specific cells right here that are called choanocytes. And these choanocytes actually have flagellum on them, and then these flagella can move and kind of help the water move along and help the sponge capture more food and facilitate that process. In other ways, this sponge can also help capture food because it's made out of two layers of cells that are separated by something called a mesohyl. And this mesohyl is basically just a gelatinous layer that contains these cells called amoebocytes. And amoebocytes are involved in digesting food and creating the skeletal fibers that make up your sponge. So if you've ever seen a sponge, all of that physical stuff you see are the skeletal fibers that were made by these amoebocytes. Also, sponges are known for being basal animals, so basically they are near the base of a evolutionary ladder. They were one of the first groups of animals that were ever created and gave rise to a lot of different species in the evolutionary tree. Also, they lack true tissues, which is kind of an interesting fact. They just have a lot of different, or they have a few different differentiated cells, and then, but those never come together to create actual tissues. Those are just separate cells that create this sponge. And then another interesting fact about sponges is that they're hermaphrodites, which basically means that they can switch between being female and male. So at some points they have eggs, and at some points they create sperm. And the eggs are usually kept right inside of the mesohyl that we talked about that had the amoebocytes in it. So the eggs would be in there, and the sperm would actually travel through the water and be carried out of the sponge through the osculum, which is also where water exits when the sponge is feeding. So sperm exits through the osculum, and water exits through there. And that sperm is carried out into the water and usually lands inside of another neighboring sponge, and that sponge, if it has eggs, can have those eggs be fertilized by that traveling sperm. So that's one way that sponges can be fertilized, and just another interesting fact about them. But basically, sponges are pretty simple creatures. They mostly just carry out the very basic needs of being a living thing. They can feed through the process that I just showed, and they can reproduce through the sending sperm out of the organism, and then having that land inside of another sponge. So all pretty basic, and that's mostly why they are basal animals. They have very basic functions, and that arose into more complex beings. But that's basically all you need to know about sponges.